today is academic writing, and I expanded a bit to academic reading and writing. So academic writing as a topic, writing as a topic can be a very boring topic. I can go on and discuss all the technical aspects in detail, and you will most likely fall asleep. The Research Evaluation Committee had a meeting last week, and that is exactly one of the points that we discussed. Faye said that when she did her studies, the lecturer actually gave the class tools on how to approach academic writing, and she gave us some wonderful tools and resources that we will have a look at today. This took me back to when I did my own degree studies, and a great part of my degree studies was spent on the learning and mastering of academic writing before I even touched on research. In each subject, we had to do at least one literature review, which meant I had at least 4 to 5 literature reviews per semester, a semester being 6 months long, where I had to learn how to find academic literature. And in those days, we didn't have the technology that we have today. We had to do it the old-fashioned way and go to the library. I had to learn to work through vast amounts of information, and soon realized that I better find a quicker way to get through all the reading. I had to learn that in academic writing, you cannot write as you speak, and that you are required to use specific terms and structure your sentences in a specific way. I had to learn about citing, referencing, plagiarism through trial and error, losing many marks in my projects until I got it right. We did not have software programs doing the work for us. So, however, there is nothing wrong with using technology to make your life easier, as long as you are more knowledgeable than the program that you're using. So this is what I would like to focus on today: learning to read and write like an academic. For those of you that already are more advanced, please bear with us, and perhaps at the end of the session, you can share your tips of what worked for you and what did not work for you. The truth is, academic writing has a lot of technical aspects that you will have to learn and practice when you touch on some of these, as we will touch on some of these aspects today. However, you will have to make your own time to go and read through these technical requirements, perhaps even using some of the techniques we will discuss today, and practice implementing them. Just attending today's workshop will unfortunately not be enough. Okay, so most of us can read and write, but are we really paying attention to what we are reading? To write well, you first need to read well. Reading and writing can make or break your research proposal or your report. We need to structure our reading and writing, starting with the way we read. Okay, that means that we have to not just read, but we have to critically read. Now, what is critical reading? Critical reading is the process of reading that goes beyond just understanding a text. Critical reading involves carefully considering and evaluating the reading, identifying the reading's strengths and implications, identifying the reading's weaknesses and flaws, looking at the big picture and deciding how the reading fits into the greater academic context, the understandings present in other books and articles on the topics. And there I've added a nice resource for you where you can read some further information on what actually critical reading involves. So when we are critically reading, we have to ask questions. Questions such as, what is the background of the piece that you are reading about? Classic example, who's the author? What was published? When was it published? In what context was it published? What is the overall purpose or claim of the piece that you're reading? Is the evidence and the theory appropriate to the purpose or the claim? If it's research that you're reading, what methodology was used? Is it trustworthy? Is it reliable? And is it valid? Is there a logical connection between the purpose or the claims that you're reading about and the evidence that they present? What limitations are there to the arguments being made? How does the reading relate to other sources on the topic? And are there any gaps in the reading that you can identify? Now, a good practice example of critical reading is if you go back to some work that you've previously written and you go use these questions on the previous slide and this slide and go and evaluate your own work, what you have written. And then after you've done that, what will you change after you've asked yourself these questions? And then you will come to see also how you've written your work before and what you actually need to consider going forward. And then keep these questions in mind when writing your research proposal. Okay. So we need to read with a plan. The golden rule is structure, structure, structure. You need to implement structure even before you start reading. When you start reading various sources of information, you are likely to feel like this guy in this picture. Okay, so that is what cognitive overload looks like. So though you are only required to reference 10 sources, if I'm correct, Zoe, in your research report, you will be reading much, much more than only 10 sources of information. You could easily spend hours reading, reviewing many sources and still have no direction. So I would recommend that you keep a reading journal and that you continuously make notes in that journal. Like Jaco said in previous sessions, keep a little pocketbook with you, and whenever you have an idea or something that you've read, just jot it down. But there's also a more organized way that you can do it. And I want you guys after this session or whenever you have time available to go look at this interesting video by Dr. Gilbert, which is about critical reading techniques for researchers. A lot of what I discussed today will focus on the content of this video. Okay, so when we read, we need to have a plan of action, a strategy that we are going to follow. You can start off with a mind map. A mind map is not a bad idea, but don't get carried away with your mind map. Just jot down a few ideas and the relationships that will lead you to the research questions that you would like to research. Okay, if you have a look at this mind map, can you see what I mean about structure? It doesn't look like there's any structure or a flow of information. It's just a big mess. It almost looks like the previous picture of the guy with the cognitive overload. It's very important to structure, and it's very important to have a question to focus and direct your reading efforts. You need to be selective and picky on what are you going to read. You need to narrow down as much as possible the information that you are going to fill your brain with. Okay, so refine and focus down, refine and focus down. Otherwise, you're just going to experience cognitive overload, and you're not going to be taking anything in or be able to make sense of anything. So I want us to have a look at the technique that Dr. Gilbert used and how to organize your reading. That is a screenshot of the video, which I posted the link to, of how Dr. Gilbert suggests we approach our reading. I will go into a bit more detail and do a practical exercise with you. Okay, so Dr. Gilbert's technique focused on the example of an eagle. This is how you're going to start reading. So basically from a bird's eye view. If you look at an eagle, the eagle flies above the water. It tries to stay out of the water as much as possible, because if it falls into the water, then it's going to drown. And the same applies to your study. If you are not focused and you just dive in and you start reading and you go ahead, then most likely you're going to drown in all the information. So what an eagle would fly above the water and scan the water to see if there's any fish available that it can get. And then secondly, it will dip just to the surface to go down and to see what fish is available. And then lastly, it will dive to grab the fish. So that's from a bird's eye view. And then once you've found an article, I'll explain the dip and dive, the scan, dip and dive a bit more detail a bit later. But once you found your article, the article has, or the textbook that you're reading, or the other sources that you're reading, that source have about 2 to 3 minutes to impress you. That's the 2 to 3 minute rule. You will read the abstract or the introduction of the source. And if that doesn't pull your attention, or seems like it focus on what you have an idea, your question that you have, then you're going to give that source a skip. You're not going to look further into that resource. Okay. Once the abstract or the introduction caught your attention, you will identify key sections that may be of more interest to you. And you will do that by reading the headings of the piece of work, the subheadings, and only the first sentence of each paragraph. So the first sentence of each paragraph is usually the main statement of the paragraph, the main idea what the paragraph is about. And the rest of the paragraph just explains the first sentence in more detail. Okay, so then you will scan through the document, you will read the headings and the subheadings. If something caught your eye of interest, you read a heading or a subheading that looks like it's got to do with your question that you have, then you will go in and start reading the first sentences of each of those paragraphs. And if there's something of particular interest, then you can start reading in more detail to see what they have to say about the question that you have. Okay. So first, before we continue on to the next slide, which I'm going to have open already, I want us to have a look. You can just give me, Trinity, I want us to have a look on the technique that Dr. Gilbert applied. So first of all, we cannot do any reading if we do not have a question that we want to know something about. So we did a nice session on research topics and the possible questions that you can ask, the different types of research questions. So you guys must have more or less an idea or a question in your head at the moment. So I want you to please give me a question that we can use as an example. You don't need to necessarily raise your hand. You can just speak and tell us. Please, someone give me a question.
Okay, what is the cause of workplace conflict? That's a question.
Just repeat again for me, please.
What is the cause of workplace conflict?
the cause of workplace conflict. Okay, so give me two topics. The first is workplace conflict in relation to what? Sorry. So you want to know the causes of workplace conflict. I want to link workplace conflict and, okay, let's use causes. So that would be your my spelling. So we're looking at workplace conflict and the causes of workplace conflict. So that would be your main question. You want to know what is workplace conflicts and what causes workplace conflict. Now you're going to think of 2 to 3, let's say 2 to 3 key concepts around workplace conflict and the causes of workplace conflict that you want to go and research. So what is the first concept or issue in relation to workplace conflict and what causes workplace conflict that we can add there that we want to go read about?
Jackie, I can maybe add something there. Perhaps communication could be an issue. Communication.
Sorry, communication. Okay, so another concept 2, with regards to workplace conflict and the causes of workplace conflict.
I would like to maybe perhaps add workplace bullying.
Bullying, workplace bullying.
Management style.
And management styles. Okay, bullying, I'm not sure if I spelled that correct, but it's okay. It's not a spelling test. Okay, so now we have our question, workplace conflict and the causes. We want to know more about that. And we're only going to focus on these three issues. So we want to know about the relationship between communication and workplace conflict. And we want to know about the relationship between workplace bullying and workplace conflict, what causes that. And we want to know about management styles. So we are not going to waste our times and effort to read anything else about workplace conflict and what causes workplace conflicts besides these three concepts that we have dotted down at the moment. Okay, so now what you're going to do is now you're going to start researching. You're going to go to your libraries. You're going to go to your online libraries. You're going to do internet searches, and you are going to find articles on workplace conflict and communication. And what you're going to do as soon as you're going to use that scan, dip and dive technique when you find the article. So when you find an article that's about workplace conflict and communication, you're going to first of all just scan through that article, scanning, reading the abstract, reading the introduction, scanning through the headings and subheadings, and then start reading the first sentences of each paragraph. If there's something of particular interest about communication and workplace conflict, that is when you will start dipping into that paragraph and then diving into analyze it and read it in a bit more detail. You're not going to read the whole article. So what often happens is somebody can go and they can read a whole article in detail, spend hours reading that whole article, and the next day they don't know what they've read because it's cognitive overload, information overload. You have a better chance at remembering what you're going to what you have read if you use this scan, dip and dive technique. Then once you've read it, you're going to start. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to add the reference, because it gets very chaotic if you work with a lot of sources of information. So first of all, you're going to get the reference of the source. We're going to say brand, just click there. Why is it not typing? Brand 2021, and the title is, you can do the proper referencing. Just for argument's sake, I'm just going to say academic writing. Okay, so you're going to add your reference so that your reference is there. So now, when you've looked at brand and you read up at communication and conflict in the workplace, you're going to make your notes. What did this article say of value? You're going to put your notes, a brief summary of what this article, what you found in this article. Remember, you did not read the whole article. You just scanned, dip and dived, and you're going to put a few notes there for yourself. You're going to look if this article says anything about workplace bullying. If this article doesn't say anything about workplace bullying, you're just going to leave the space open. And then you're going to see if there's anything in about management styles. So then if there's nothing in about management styles, then you're also going to leave the space open. Okay, then you're going to look for your next article. Let's say it's Zawi, or rather use your surname, or 2021. Not going to put a title. This is just for demonstration purposes. Now you're reading your next article or source of information. Again, you're going to use the scan, dip and dive technique. You're going to see, what does this article have to say? You're going to first read the abstract introduction. What does this article have to say about communication, workplace bullying, management styles? If it doesn't say, so you will make, say, example, this article is only about workplace bullying. You're going to make your notes over there. If it doesn't say anything about communication or management styles, you are not going to include it in your notes, and you will continue on and say Pullman is the next source. The same thing over again. What does Pullman say about communication? Pullman said a lot of nice things about communication. He also spoke about management styles and communication. So you will make your notes there so that you can keep track of your notes. Okay, but now one problem with this way, now we've got a nice structure and we're only reading what we absolutely need to do, and we've got a nice focus of what we read, and we're not wasting our time reading information that's not really going to help us to answer the question that we have. Okay, but now there's a problem. The problem here is that what we have so far is only descriptive in nature. There's no critical thinking there involved, and we haven't done any critical reading as yet. So this is where you're gonna go back and forth to the same articles that you've read, and you're gonna maybe note critical aspects. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna add something. Maybe I said something that's very that you can critique about communication, and I said, maybe you don't always need to be, you don't always need to, let's keep it simple, need to communicate. Other people should know what you want to say. Okay, so that would be your that would be in the article, and then you are the judge. You can imagine like a courtroom set up. You are the judge, and then you will say, okay, but this this point that Jackie made or Mrs. Brandt made in her article, I don't agree with that. For me, that is that's a gap in her theory or in her research. She didn't look at effective communication methods. She also didn't consider management styles when she looked at communication. So you will make your critical notes in red there. And you're going to do the same with each of the sources. You're going to have your notes giving you a broad description of what's going in the article, what's of interest of you, and then you're also going to start sifting through those articles and adding your critical ideas and your critical thoughts on that. So let me just quickly go back to the slide. Okay, so the technique that I showed you was just a descriptive. We had to add critical thinking. We needed to ask why the author said certain things and how did they arrive at their conclusion. These are basically the questions of critical reading that we discussed earlier, just simplified. Then you will write your critical comments in red and evaluate both the positive and the negative, and you will rationalize. A key part of critical thinking is you can't just say, Jackie should have, when she discussed communication in her study, she should have looked at management styles as well. You have to give a reason, and that's where the rationalization comes in. You have to provide reasons, and then you have to compare and contrast sources, and that will happen in the final comments or in the conclusion. So I just want to clarify something with regards to conclusions. Conclusions are not summaries, because I know a lot of the pre-graduate students and many people think that a conclusion is a summary of what has already been said. But in actual fact, a conclusion is more like it's a judgment that you make. It's not a summary. And I just want to go back to the Excel spreadsheet that I showed. So in your final column, you will begin to see everywhere your critical thoughts that you have dotted down. You will see it in relation to the topics which you selected, or the concepts that you selected, and you will see the sources from which they come. So now you will start to evaluate, giving both the positive and the negative, and identifying the gaps. What could they have done better? What didn't they consider? Where are the gaps between all these sources of information that you read on the topic? What has nobody else considered in what you have read? And that would give your unique angle when you approach your own research topic. What are you going to focus on? So this you will put also compare and contrast. Contrast your critical thinking over there. You will put that also in red. And it's very nice because you will now have an example. You will be able to tie everything together, and you will see a structure emerging, central themes emerging. I really recommend using this method. Back to our presentation. Okay, so a lot of people may argue that you won't have a good grasp of the content that you're reading if you just use the scan, dip, and dive technique. But the thing is this is just to get going. You need to get going. You need to start. You can always go back to the article. You can always go back to the comments that you made. Don't be scared to comment and provide your critical thoughts there, thinking that you might be wrong. As you go through the literature and as you are reading, you will go back and see, okay, maybe on this point I need to make a change. Maybe this wasn't so correct. Maybe I need to approach it on a different in a different way. So you will go back and forth, and make changes. Then when it comes to academic writing, I want to emphasize that you need to stay away from fancy language. Don't try to be fancy and impress anyone with your with the way you're writing and the words that you're using. Use simple language so that you can get that point across, clear, concise, and that's where we will go to the next part of our topic, and that's the academic writing part. Considering writing styles and grammar, I think the most important tool that you need when it comes to academic writing is Grammarly. I cannot live without Grammarly. I need Grammarly for everything that I do. Grammarly is free to download. So after this presentation, after the session we had today, the first thing that you need to go and do is download Grammarly. Grammarly is a cloud-based writing assistant that will check your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation, the clarity, and also delivery errors in real time. So, and the nice thing about Grammarly is it's also like a sort of test or evaluation that you get from them every time that you make mistakes, and you start learning from your own mistakes by the suggestions that Grammarly gives to you. So you will find that you will improve and improve more as you go on and you practice this. So definitely get Grammarly, which brings us to the next slide. Once you have Grammarly, like I said previously, unfortunately, there is many technical aspects with regards to academic writing that you need to consider. And it's going to be a very boring session if I just sit here and I tackle each one of them bit by bit. I'm just going to be talking the whole time, and you're most probably not going to remember any of them. So you need to make time to read and go through them yourself. You don't have to learn them and memorize them, but at least so that you are aware of what you need to do and what you should avoid doing. So what I'm going to do for you is I will make the APA manual, chapter 4 and chapter 5, pages 111 to 149. I will make that available to you. Either scan it in for you so that you can look at it. It's in any case a good idea if you're considering further studies to buy the application, the APA manual yourself. But I will either scan in the pages or I will summarize it for you in a document. Depends on what's allowable. I will just check our policies again. And so I will make that available to you so that we don't sit and discuss each aspect in detail. So effective writing is being able to communicate ideas clearly, and that is the recipe for success. Not trying to be fancy. Effective academic writing balances continuity. Continuity is logical consistency throughout your work. It has to be presented in a logical way. The first thing being discussed first, the last thing being discussed last, and then bringing the relationships together between the things that you have discussed. There needs to be a proper flow and a smooth transition from each part of your work, starting from the sentences that you use. One sentence should flow into the next sentence. One paragraph should flow into the next paragraph, and one idea should flow into another idea. Conciseness is to say only what you need to say in your writing. Back again, do not try to use fancy and complex language. Be concise, only say what you need to say in your writing. And then clarity is very important. Be clear and be precise. It is important that your writing is accurate and transparent so that the readers may understand your meaning. There's no point in doing a research study, but nobody can actually understand your study, or they have to read through pages and pages of paragraphs that's repeating themselves. Really take that time to plan, to organize your proposal and your research report. Use short sentences and paragraphs. Separate ideas with your paragraphs. Each new paragraph must represent a new idea. Don't put too many ideas into one paragraph. Also, one concept per sentence and one idea per paragraph. That's the rule, and everything boils back again to the golden rule. Everything is about structure, 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 and that is how you will be able to keep your focus and save yourself a lot of time doing this research. Okay, so you also need to know the layout and structure of your paper that you will be submitting, but we've made it easy for you. There's already templates available, frameworks on what your research topic should look like, the proposal and the report available on the virtual campus. I heard earlier that some of you already had a look at them, which I'm absolutely very glad about. Also, look at the guidelines, the research guidelines that's available to you. Okay, so it's important to get an overview, to start big and see what will be necessary, and then narrow it down to see what will be necessary for you. What will you be required of to go and do for your research, working through the frameworks and the research guidelines. And that is a good starting point. And then after that, you can start to narrow it down and focus, get more focus to what you want to include in your study. Okay, you can also find more information on formatting and structures from the APA website. I'm not going to go into that. These are some points to remember with regards to the 7th edition of the APA guidelines and academic writing. I'm not going to go in detail to them. We did have a previous session where we discussed these topics in detail. So have a look at the abbreviations. How are you supposed to use abbreviations? Also when there's no date or the date is missing. The use of the ampersand, the use of et al. Or DOIs and URLs, citing and referencing secondary sources, citing, and then we will have an in-depth Zoom session with Mr. Poorman with regards to Mendeley, or Mendeley, I'm never sure how you pronounce it, Mendeley or Mendeley. So go and download Mendeley if you haven't done so already, and have your questions ready for the workshop that Mr. Poorman is going to present on this wonderful tool. And that brings us to the end of my presentation.